Okay, class, welcome to Chapter 3 review. We're going to start with 3.1 comparing decimals. Please take a look at all the problems, pause the video, solve them all, and press play when you're ready to see the answers. Okay, let's take a look. Problem number 1. Here we have the difference in the numbers is in the ones place. Of course, 5 is larger than 4, so we use less than. Here it's in the tenths place, and 5 is larger than 2. Again, the tenths place, and 5 is larger than 4. Here, the ones place, remember we don't care about all these digits afterwards. All we care about is the ones place. 5 is larger than 4. And lastly, problem number 5 is a tricky one. With problem number 5, we have negatives. So normally, again, we look in the tens place because that's where our difference is. And we have 1 and a 0. Normally 1 would be larger than 0. But since we're working backwards, we're looking at which one is closer to 0. So we would say that 0 is larger than 1 because it's closer to 0. Okay, problem number 6 and 7, you should be putting them in order from least to greatest. So let's take a look and see how you did. 6 and 14 hundredths, 6 and 23 hundredths, 6 and 32 hundredths. Problem number 7, watch out, we have some negatives. Of course, those need to come first. And again, negatives are backwards. So negative 5 and 8 hundredths, negative 5 and 75, negative 5 and 8 tenths, negative 5 and 75 hundredths, 5 and 18 hundredths, and then 5 and 82 hundredths. Okay, so hopefully that should have been pretty easy for you. Just nice quick review. Okay, 3.2, adding and subtracting decimals. Please add these 3 problems, keeping in mind your rules when working with negatives and your rules when working with decimals. Go ahead and press play when you're ready to see the answers. Okay, taking a look at our first problem, we simply line up the decimals. So 0 is over the 1, 3 with the 4, 7 with the 9. Add them up. We have our final answer. Number 9, they are both negative, so you just add just like you always do. Adding the 0 with the 2, the 7 with the 8, and the 8 with nothing. And of course, since we're adding 2 negatives, our answer is simply more negative. And number 10, this one's a tricky one. We first have to skip change because we can never subtract when working with negatives, and I know I can't do 1 minus 7. So I go ahead and do skip change. Now I'm adding up negative and positive. I'm secretly subtracting. And notice I have to add a 0 on the end here. So I'm doing 0 minus 5, 3 minus 4, and 7 minus 1. So I will have to do a little borrowing and carrying. And we have our final answer. Of course, the negative has a greater absolute value, so my final answer is negative. Section 3.3, multiplying and dividing decimals. Go ahead and do these problems here. Press play when you're ready to see the answers. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at number 1. You count over 2 spaces after you've done your multiplication, and you end up with 2 and 56 hundredths. Here, you're multiplying a positive and negative, so right now we know the socks don't match, so my answer should end up being negative. I'm also going to count over 4 spaces with my final answer, 2 here and 2 here, and I have my answer. When I divide, again, I need to move the decimal in both the dividend and the divisor, so it disappears from the divisor, so it disappears in that number that's outside of the division sign. Notice there are no negatives, my answer is going to be positive, simply 9. Number 4, again, no negatives, 89 hundredths. Number 5, we've got all kinds of things going on. So what we want to take a look at first is that we do the division, then we can do the addition, and finally we can subtract our sum here from our quotient here. Okay. Number 6, I need to work inside the parentheses, do my subtraction first. Then I divide, then I add. So a lot of steps there, be careful. And I have my answer. Again, make sure you rewatch these or pause the video so you can work out why you might have gotten an answer wrong. 3.4, turning the decimal into a percent. This is nice and easy. All I do is move the decimal 2 places to the right. And add my percent sign, of course. Notice it keeps the negative on both of these because you have a negative in the decimal, you will have a negative in the percent. 3.5, finding percent of a number. 52% of 925. Of course, I turn my percent into a decimal and multiply, and I have my answer. Number 2, 30% of 170. Turn my percent into a decimal and multiply, and I have my answer. 3.6, finding discount and markup. So the first problem, obviously, I can see discount. So I need to use my formula, sale price equals original price minus discount. The second problem, obviously, it's a markup. Retail price equals wholesale price plus markup. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over these. Of course, you need to write your formula, plug in your numbers. Notice my original price was 45. My discount, I need to find out what 15% of 45 is. Okay, so I need to multiply those together. Then I can subtract, and I end up with my answer. Remember, we talked about a different way to do this. You could also say, well, if I'm going to take away 15%, it means I'm going to keep 85%. So if you did 45 times 85% as a decimal, you would get the exact same answer. Number 2, again, you can do the same thing here. So the traditional way, you do have the markup, the wholesale price plus the wholesale price times the markup. Your other option is to add 100% to that markup, so it'd be 2 2/10, and I would end up with the same answer. Okay, so I do my multiplication and then I add. Either way, I will have the same answer there. Okay, let's continue on with 3.6, commission and profit. First two problems involve profit, so we use that pi formula, P equals I minus E. And again, plug in your numbers and subtract. Very simple, okay, very basic. Numbers 3 and 4, we have the total sales, and this should be a percent sign. I apologize for the 5. Percent commission, so 8 5/10% and 6%. So of course my formula is find the percent commission times the total sales. Notice on commission you don't have to do any adding or subtracting. Common mistake students make is they try to add it on to the total sales. The person doesn't get what they sold when it's commission. They get a percentage of what they sold. So that person leaves with $121 just for selling someone else that amount. There is no addition or subtraction, so be careful there. Just multiplication. Okay, 3.7, almost there. We're changing these numbers, so I've got 50,000, I'm changing it down to 40,000. So right away I know it's a discount. So I either need a negative or the word discount, one of the two. So I go ahead and, not discount, decrease. So I go ahead, I do my subtraction, then my division, and I end up with a decrease of 20%. Or you could say negative 20%, one or the other. Number 2, I'm going from 2 up to 32. So I know it's an increase, and an increase of 1,500%, a huge increase. Number 3, 56,802 up to 416,912. So again, it's an increase. Okay, so again, I can write the word increase, or I can just leave it positive. It doesn't matter. Okay, these last two problems here, we're increasing it by a percent. So I need to find out what 7% of 350 is. So I multiply, and I get this, and then I had to add it on to 350 to get my answer. And here for my decrease, I multiply, and then I subtract. So notice I got my answer, and I actually need to do my subtraction kind of the other way around from the way I've set it up. It was a little tough to read it the other way, so I wanted you to see that this was your answer, and then you subtract 845 minus $422.50, and you end up with $422.50. Of course, we'd need our dollar sign if it's money and our 0. Now in this case, notice there's no dollar sign here, so I don't want a dollar sign in my answer either. Okay, almost there. Simple interest. We have the principal, the rate, and the time, and all you're doing is multiplication. So go ahead, multiply, you'll see your answers. Notice you can multiply in any order you want. Last one, finding the balance, we can use the account balance formula or simply use the simple interest formula. Just make sure you add on the principal at the end. Okay, So notice we've got that principal being added on there using the account balance formula. You'll get the same answer either way. Okay, last one I wanted to go over just a little bit more. We've got another simple interest problem, but notice we've got 63 months. Remember, we need to turn those months into years, and we need to find out the account balance. So make sure you find that out. Okay, let's take a look at your answers. And we have $854.35 total in the account at the end. Okay, here's our quiz. Chapter 3 review quiz. Go ahead, try out those problems. We have a discount problem, a markup problem, and a simple interest problem. Take your time, and I hope you do well. Have a great day.